As I've said lots of times, if you've been in my youth group or at church, or even actually through some of the messages I've been giving on video, James is one of my favorite characters in the Bible. So let me just give you some quick background again on James. James was the brother of Jesus, half-brother. Jesus had four brothers and at least three or four sisters that we know of. And at one point in Jesus' ministry, James was with his brothers and sisters, and they went to Jesus and they basically wanted to put him away, to force him to stop teaching because they thought he was just crazy. Well, you don't see James at all during the crucifixion. He doesn't appear to be there as Jesus is being crucified. You don't hear of him being there at the interment in the tomb. And the next time we hear about James is after Jesus comes back from the dead, after the resurrection. The Bible records that the only one-on-one meeting he had was with his brother James. And I always say this, and you've heard it a lot if you've been around any of my teachings. I just want to know what was said. I think that conversation would have been amazing, right? When Jesus comes back and he talks to his brother after he was resurrected, the brother who had thought he was crazy and wanted to put him away. But what we do know is James came out of that meeting transformed. And so later, James becomes the leader of the church in Jerusalem, this new the Way, the church was called, this new faith called the Way. James becomes the leader in Jerusalem. And then later, James writes this book that, strangely enough, is called in the Bible the book of James. And the point of this entire book, and I go ahead and read it, it's an amazing book, because what it does is it makes the case that you cannot separate your faith from your behaviors, that throughout the entire thing, James says that you can't separate what you say you believe from what you actually believe. So with that in mind, I just want to kind of jump back to when I was a kid. When I was a child, it was in the days when we would have dinner around the tables, and that's a dying thing. In fact, it died at my house, sadly to say, but we used to have dinner at the table. And every night when my mother would make dinner, she would set on an extra table or extra plate at the table. And there was this young man in the neighborhood who quite often would just come in the back door and just sit down, and it didn't seem weird to me at all. He would just sit down and eat dinner with us and then hang out with us. And what's jumped forward a few years, this man actually accepted Christ. He became a police officer. He became a force for good in his community. And what I didn't really put two and two together was my parents knew that he was just coming from a rough home life. That at the time, his life at home, I loved his parents, but it was just, he needed a break from that. He needed some stability. And so he would come to the Knight household where he always knew there was a plate out for him. I can remember being about, probably 12 years old, maybe 13, coming home and hearing conversation in what we had, our den, we called it, our little family room. And I went and looked, and there were people that my parents knew from our church, and they were there, and I could see something was going on, so I just kind of listened and then left. But what I discovered was happening as I listened was that their son had come into some troubles, and they needed some financial help, and they needed it that night, and they didn't have it. They were people who just didn't have those means, and so they'd come to my parents' house, and my dad that night, he and my mother gave them the financial help they needed in the moment. And as I look back, these are just two instances of really the only kind of needs that I was aware of growing up. I was only aware of those needs closest to me. I wasn't aware of everything in the world. I was aware of my friends sometimes who needed shoes that my parents or coaches would pop for. I was aware, for example, on Sunday morning as I went to Elm Street Baptist Church or First Baptist, I forget which one it was, but I can remember that one of them, I think it was Elm Street, had a busing ministry where the men in the church would go and they would just go to some financially a little more financially impoverished, I guess, neighborhoods, and they would pick up kids who couldn't make it to church, and they would bring it. That was the only issues I was aware of, were those that were closest to us. But today it's really changed, hasn't it? Today we can't escape the issues all around us. We're bombarded with our phones. We're bombarded daily, 24 hours a day, with not just what's happening down the street from us or maybe in another neighborhood from us, but actually what's happening all around the world. And what I think's happened has been this law of unintended consequences in my lifetime I've seen take effect, which is we, believers, followers of the way, we tend to kind of not not help as much. We don't interact as much. We don't intervene in the lives of people as much. And I think in my own life, it's because there's times I just feel like, man, what can I actually do? But the amazing thing about it, when you read how the church actually grew, historically, what it did, it was going out into the neighborhoods. It invented orphanages. It invented, in many ways, the idea of education for children. It invented, actually, in many ways, the concept of children and childhood in general. One of the ways it grew that we know from a lot of the Roman writings that were coming back, trying to find reasons to indict the church, to condemn the way, this new faith, what they would come back to say was how they love each other. And it wasn't just how they loved each other within the church, it was how they loved people in their community and how they reached out to people in their community. They were this source of great help. But today it just seems like, man, there's just too much need. And so one of the reasons that we decided to create this new church called LifePoint was because I wanted to do a thing where we would interact with our community, where we would not be separate from the community, that I really wanted to have this instrument to intervene in the lives of people. Because as a coach, my wife and I, she coaches, she's at the school, and as a coach and as a youth pastor, I just have this beautiful platform into people's lives when they have an issue. Many of you who are watching right now, you've asked me into your home in times of mourning or in times of need with your kids or celebration. And I just have this wonderful avenue. And I thought, man, I just want to do more of that. So I wanted to create this church. We decided to create LifePoint, just this church that would be focused on interacting, intervening in the lives of the people in our own community. In fact, that's what we came up with as our little motto, which is living faithfully, locally. Well, we were really excited about what we were going to do with it, and we were really pushing hard to get it building and to do all this stuff. And then, bam, just like the rest of you, this pandemic, it hit us and changed our plans. And so we just began to do the online stuff, which we decided we were going to be doing anyway. Online was something we were going to push because that's what we could do, was online. And so we were actually in a position to do online things. And we got so excited because we were positioned well when this pandemic hit. Nobody could have a church that we could do it. But I think we kind of neglected this idea of living faithfully locally. So about 2 weeks ago, somebody called me who's involved at LifePoint. A LifePoint member called me and said, well, what are we doing in this pandemic? What are we doing for the people of Sweet Home to help them out in this unique time where their needs are going to be unique also? And I really didn't have an answer, and so they challenged me. They said, well, what are you doing? You sold us on this idea that we were going to be interacting in the community, and it made me consider, it kind of humbled me. And so I began to pray and think and consider, what could we do at LifePoint that could help people out in this time? And I kept coming back to about 20 years ago when my youngest son was born, and he had all kinds of medical needs. And Michelle and I, we couldn't work, so our bills weren't paid. And so I went down to City Hall, and I was going to talk about how we couldn't pay our water bill. We were going to be behind. And somebody had been paying our water bill. That somebody had stepped up, and they were paying our water bill. And so I started to think about that, and I thought, man, that's what I want to do. I want to help people in some real intangible way. So I called up the city manager, and I just asked him, I said, hey, I told him a story about my heart that we were once taken care of with our water bill. And I actually asked him, I said, what could we do to help the city of Sweet Home? What can we do to help people in need in this unique time to live faithfully, locally? So he said, man, I don't know, I'll give you a call back. And so he called me back, and here's what's amazing. I didn't ask anything about the water bills. I just said that was my heart, was from the time when we were in great need and somebody stepped up. And I had given him a number, a dollar amount that we at LifePoint were going to put towards living faithfully locally, to helping and supporting people here in whatever way we decided. And when I told him that number, he called back and he said that he had some really interesting information, which was that if we were to pay the entire city of Sweet Home's delinquent water bills for the month of March, it would be less than $100 away from the total amount I said that LifePoint wanted to do to put forth to help our community to live faithfully locally. And it just blew my mind because I didn't ask him about the water bill, but that was something that was on my heart that we had been helped with. I didn't know how much money it was going to be, but it was less than $100. So obviously, I hope right there in your living room, wherever you're listening or watching, you're going, wow, that's crazy. It was crazy to us, and so we did. So LifePoint paid the water bill for any delinquent account in the entire city of Sweet Home for March. And I say that to you not so somehow that you can think, oh, wow, what a wonderful thing that LifePoint did. In fact, I struggled with even sharing this, and I wanted to, at first I thought about doing it anonymously, but then I thought, how often, Don, you idiot, have you seen something in the course of a day that somebody has done that you watch ESPN on 30 for 30? I have a problem with watching too much sports. I've copped to that. Some amazing thing that somebody has done, or you hear something on the news that they share, you watch on Facebook, somebody stepped out and did what they were supposed to do, and it's inspired you, Don, to do it. And I thought, so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to inspire people, to encourage people, to live faithfully, locally, to not be overwhelmed with what you can't do. You see, I would love to pay the bills for every town in Sweet Home. I would love to pay every bill that people are behind on who are struggling in Sweet Home, this town I love so much, but we can't. We can't do everything. What could we do? My favorite pastor that I listen to is Andy Stanley. And he said that in these times that when you have this huge need that you don't know how to address, he said, just do for the one what you wish you could do for everyone. And as it turns out in James, the book of James, chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, I'll just paraphrase it in my mind. This is what he said, and I hope I get it close. He said, what good is it when someone is hungry or cold if you say to them, go, be fed, be warm? You know, it doesn't do any good. I can have when we say things like, oh, sending you my best thoughts, sending you good vibes, and yet people are still hurting. I've been in a situation where people have blessed us, and so we decided to do for the one what we wish we could do for everyone. We had one thing we could do, and so we at Sweet Home LifePoint, we paid the entire city of Sweet Home's delinquent water bills for March. And a couple times since then, some people have wanted to come up and shake my hand for what we did. And it feels weird because we did it at LifePoint because we have been blessed. I've been blessed in the past by people. And so I'll tell you this, I don't want anybody to shake my hand, but I do want you today to take my hand. See, I'm going to challenge everybody in this who knows how far, man, right? Videos can go on YouTube. I challenge everybody who sees this video to prayerfully consider what you can do. You see, people say that to me quite often when I share a need that someone's given to me, and a community member or a family member, they say, what can I do? And what I've said quite often is, I don't know. What can you do? See, I would ask you guys everywhere you're out there to be inspired by the times that people have taken your hand and lifted you up into a place where now you're in a position to bless other people. If you're one of those people out there who absolutely are in a position to do something for one person this week, I would challenge you to shut off all the white noise of the needs from the world, the needs from across the nation that you just shut down and say, there's nothing I can do, and consider doing for the one that's crossed your mind today. Do for the one what you wish you could do for everyone. In fact, I'll say this. Call your pastors if you want to do something. Call your churches and say, are there people who are hurting? I would say, call Ray Towery at City Hall. He probably didn't want that ad, but I'll say it. And ask him, perhaps, what can I do to help people in our community? You see, I love my community. I love Sweet Home. I love this town, but I also, I love Christ. And I just feel called. I feel called to behave in such a way that I don't separate my actions from my faith. And when I think about the hand that I took years ago that lifted us up on something as simple as a water bill, but it gave us such relief, Michelle and I, in a time when we needed it. When I think about that hand, man, I want to stretch out my hand and lift other people up. And so that's what we did at LifePoint. I don't want you to shake my hand on that. I want you to take my hand now, those of you who've been blessed, and extend your blessings in this time of great need to prayerfully consider and then act, because you cannot separate your faith from your actions. Act and do for the one what you wish you could do for everyone.